So I know that some of you may have been at the event we did in the fall. How many of you were there in the fall? Okay. So I'm going to do largely very similar, almost the same in some parts. So don't get bored. Maybe you could go for a walk, come back. I'm very honored to be here, and I am so honored with the gentleman and the lady who are here, and Mr. Kudinik, one of my heroes, a man who actually goes and has been to space. I get to talk about it, but I haven't got to go myself yet. So what we're going to do is, and by the way, I apologize, we had some technical difficulties, and we may have some difficulties with the video, things like that. I'm afraid that maybe in the universe, until we actually learn how to do audio-visual, we may never get to space permanently. Every conference, every place I go, I've never been to a conference ever where the audio-visual worked perfectly for all 3 days or something. So let's see how we do here. So I'm going to go back to the first image. One more? There we go. So, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a ride. We're going to talk about different things. We'll talk a little bit about my company. We're going to talk about what you see happening with some of the famous billionaires that you see getting involved in space. We're going to talk a little bit about some ideas, some thoughts I actually have perhaps for how perhaps Ukraine could be more involved in the leadership role moving forward. We're going to talk a little bit about what we see in the United States as the transition to what we call new space, to a new way of doing space. And then we're going to get crazy, and we're going to talk about the spiritual reasons as to why we go. This, you're sitting here going, what the heck is that? That's lichen. Lichen. Lichen is a combination of fungus and algae. Two living creatures, two living forms that combine and work together so they can live anywhere. And you see, that's what life does. Life lives. It simply lives. This is a picture of my daughter. She's actually a little older now. But this is the first time she ever touched a living flower in her life. That was a moment of transformation for her. And this is what thinking beings do. We explore, we touch, we go beyond just living. We do much more than that. And I'm going to come back to these as we get further along. This is I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for my NGO, my not-for-profit. This is the New Worlds Institute. We have a meeting in Austin, Texas in the fall. This is our new one coming up over here. Anybody wants to come to Austin and be our guest, we would love to have you. Our goal in the organization is to prepare what I call the new pilgrims, and I'll talk about that soon. The kids who are going to go, who are going to grow up in the next 20 years and actually step out onto the moon and Mars and into space itself. So on one side of the room, and maybe this is something you could do in the Ukraine, you never know. On one side of the room, divided by a wall, we have scientists and engineers who are working out all of the technology they will need to survive when they get out there. On the other side of the wall, we have 750 school children who are designing their space colonies. It's very important. They're not just designing a space colony, they're designing the one they want to live in. Now let's talk about what's going on in our industry. This is crazy. Or as my Spanish friend says, es muy loco. It's nuts. This is science fiction. But it's happening. It's happening right now. There are real companies doing this. But this was crazy. When the first trains were put on the first rails, There were people that said, if you went more than 40 kilometers an hour, your head would explode. It was a proven scientific fact. You couldn't do it. This is crazy. Think about this for a second. You're going to put a piece of cloth over a piece of wood, and you're going to have this little thing that's firing, and you're going to climb on there, and you're going to fly through the air. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. It'll never happen. And of course, this. Someday, somebody's going to step on the moon. Right. It is totally impossible. It's never going to happen. Oh, and then we've got this thing. You're going to be able to look at this little thing you've got in your pocket or on your desk, and you're going to be able to talk to anybody in the world, anytime, and you'll be able to tap into all the knowledge of humanity and send pictures of kittens to your friends. What? Never going to happen. But it does. It always happens. Because when we dream it, and we live it, and we work for it, we make it happen. That's what we do as human beings. It's not science fiction. There are real companies in the US and elsewhere now who are actually putting money, and they're actually putting their own time and sweat into making this happen. I'm lucky enough to be a part of a couple of them, and I have a lot of friends that are working on them as well. This is the video without audio. Not happening? Technical glitch number 1. So I'm going to skip that. It's a very good video, but we'll go past it. So, one thing, the video was actually talking about our company. And I'll talk a little bit more. I have a couple more slides to talk about that. Our company is going to be doing asteroid mining in the next probably 10 to 15 years. Our goal is in 2020 to land on the first asteroid. There are 2 companies working on that, probably 3 now, and there are other companies that are going to the moon commercially as well. Now, I want to be very clear. One of the things that people talk about is, so why are you going to bring why are you going out to the asteroids to bring these things back to the Earth? Well, we're not going to go bring this stuff back to the Earth. Nature does a really good job of that all by itself. Every few million years, she brings a great big rock back. We don't have to do that. In fact, this planet is basically made of asteroid material. We're not going to do that. Our market is in space. But in a few years, let's say 10, 20 years from now, if there is an asteroid that's happening to be heading towards the Earth, we might have the guys out there working who can go out and do something about it. The goal here is to actually supply people in space. It's about using resources where they are. Now, I'm showing you this picture because where I come from, and by the way, forgive my references, many of my references, of course, are going to be based on American heritage or Texas heritage, where I come from, which is a frontier state, but you've got your own, but I have to speak from where I live, from where I come from, and the heritage I understand. Now, there was a time when the central part of North America was considered a desert. It was the equivalent of space. You would die if you went out across it. At that period of time, this was considered to be almost like a spaceship. This was a vessel of exploration. But here's something very important. Let's see if I can make this work. But you can't see it. You see these motors? These are the engines. There's 6 of them. Or thrusters. What's really great about these engines is this is the fuel. It's called grass. These engines use the fuel that's already out there. In fact, the entire vehicle, the space vehicle, is itself built from materials that are already there. Can you imagine, if you think about my history in America, if we had had to import every horse, every pound of grass from Europe before we could go do anything, I wouldn't be here. Now, which means you're probably out having a nice weekend. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the same thing in space. We're going to use the resources of space to supply those who are going. We're going to be the gas station. I just think this is a cool picture. I just thought it was kind of cool. But we're going to be the petrol station in space for those who are going out there. You see, if you went outside right now and you picked up a kilo of soil out in the garden out here, and you carried that kilo of soil out to where the space station is, it would be worth probably about 10,000 euros. Just dirt. If you carry it out to where the satellites are that broadcast your television, it would be worth maybe 30,000, 50,000 euros. Just dirt. That's because it's so expensive to fly into space. And this gets to what we're interested in, this water. What we're going to be selling, the gold of space, is water. That's the gold. We're not going to be going out to space to bring back gold and platinum or things like that. I mean, it would be great. It'd be wonderful if we come across it. But the idea for us is to go out after the water. Water. See, if you have water, you have hydrogen and oxygen. So if you have water to drink, you have air to breathe. If you break it into hydrogen and oxygen, and you light a match, you've got rocket propellant. So it's very simple. This is our first spacecraft that's going to go to an asteroid in 2020. It's called Prospector 1. The motor in this spacecraft will have the capability of converting the materials we find in the asteroid into propellant. It's going to make its own petrol, let's say, as it flies. As it goes out, it's going to actually scan the asteroid. This is all was the kind of stuff that was in the video, actually. And then it'll land on the asteroid. And it'll establish our right of non-interference. And I'm going to come back to that policy question later on. In other words, we will have the right to extract resources from this asteroid. Let's see if I get this working. Oh. We believe, by the way, that most of the larger asteroids are not solid rocks. They're just piles of gravel, which means we'll be scooping them up. This shows one of our original paintings. We have a great artist who works for us, and he made it look like, you know, some big battle star, super, it's actually going to be very small, about the size of a refrigerator, and a very small unit. And then there'll be many of them coming in series, like the train, like a car is on a train. What we're doing in the meantime, because our business plan is so long, in other words, it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years before we really start making money from asteroid materials. So what do we tell an investor? Because investors need to see their money coming back sooner than that. So what we've done is we're taking the technology that we're going to be using to go out into space and mine asteroids, and we're using it to build commercial satellites right now. We've signed, I can't get into the numbers, but more than $10 million worth of contracts with commercial satellite companies. But what's really interesting, and we have some very smart engineers, by the way, I am not an engineer, but we have some very smart engineers, and what they've done is they've come up with the motors. By the way, this looks big. It's only, let me see that one, 20 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 30 centimeters. And that's part of the revolution that has allowed us to begin to do commercial space activities. It's getting so small, so cheap, so easy to fly these things. But these guys came up with a motor for this. And we were looking at something very elaborate. Remember I told you we would take the hydrogen and the oxygen and we would be able to ignite that and create rocket propellant. One of our young engineers had this brilliant idea. He said, look, we've got water. So why don't we take the water, we'll put the water in a container, and then we'll heat the water up using the solar power of the sun, and that'll make steam. And the steam will go that way, and the rocket will go that way. We were like, whoa! Steam engine. It's a freaking steam engine. And now we're selling them to commercial operators. Now, why is that interesting? Why is that important if you're in the space field? Because these little spacecraft, when they fly into space, are usually, they fly along with large, billion-dollar, very expensive spacecraft. And these people, the people that fly like at SpaceX and other companies that are flying these large spacecraft, don't like the idea that you're going to have a little spacecraft in there that's going to have some sort of nasty propellant that might blow up and destroy their big spacecraft. Because you're on a piggyback. You're riding along with them. So now we can go to our clients, our customers, and they can put these little spacecraft in there, and since they run on water, they're totally safe. It sounds very simple, but that adds up to millions of dollars of savings for people in terms of insurance policies and things like that. There's a lot more I could tell you about the company, but I'd have to sign something with you. Or kill you. No, you kill me, whatever. So if you're interested in investing, we can talk later. Now, I will say this. I've been with Deep Space for about 4 years. I'm slowly now starting to get back into other projects. I've been involved in many, many projects. Among them, several years ago, we took over the Mir space station for about 9 months. I was lucky enough to fly the first commercial space tourist, things like that. And I love asteroids and things like that, but I'm starting to get into some other projects. I wanted to show you one of them just for fun. This is called Space Diver. Space Diver. This is for the young people and the adventurers. Imagine flying to the edge of space on a rocket and diving off and coming back to the Earth. It's completely possible. Now, the reason I'm going to show you this is, yes, I'm looking at it as a project. It's a very interesting project. And in fact, the Soviet space program proved, and the American space program, that you could actually go all the way up to the level of the space station and dive back if you have a device under you. It's quite possible. But this is the kind of thinking we have to get into, because this makes things exciting. This is extreme sports. This is, you could see Red Bull doing this, or somebody else doing this. You could see people going and paying, you know, the adrenaline junkies, the people that do the wingsuits and things like that. So we started this project in 2006. We had the cover of Popular Science magazine. It was a very exciting thing. And speaking of wingsuits, my partner, who was going to work with me on it, went out on a wingsuit and ran into a cliff at 180 kilometers, and we lost him. So the project got put away, but we're getting ready to bring it back. You heard about the flight where they went up on a balloon and they jumped off. Well, this is the edge of space. So this is, hopefully, we'll see how this video goes. Whoop. Is that video working? Do you see a video on there? Nope. Okay, I don't think we're going to be doing a lot of videos today. There it is. Click. Yeah, we have no audio, but this is a very visual one, so. So the idea is using a small vertical takeoff, vertical landing spacecraft. You fly to the edge of space. It's called the von Karman line. If you cross that line, then you get your astronaut wings. This is where Richard Branson wants to fly his tourists. Imagine going up that high, the incredible view you would have, and launching yourself off. to come back to the earth. These are the kind of things that are possible once we begin to look at space differently. And she does break, and it is a she, by the way, she does break the speed of sound. This was done by Kyle Botha, a friend of ours from Vancouver. And then eventually you hit the atmosphere, you start slowing down, and you're able to deploy a parachute. Now, what's interesting about this is imagine that everywhere that they put the Virgin Galactic vehicles to carry tourists, on the other side of the field you have one of these for the extreme sports fans, the extreme sports participants. I had a conversation with Virgin Galactic and I said, guess which ones of those customers is going to come back? It's going to be these guys, because they're adrenaline junkies and they want to go higher and higher and higher. The reason I'm telling you about this is because somebody out there in this audience, and in fact my whole talk today, is aimed at one of you, and I don't know which one it's going to be, or two of you, who may go out and do something about this, who may get inspired and start this company. You see, what we've got going on, and I don't have my iPhone, I actually left it in the Uber on my flight out here this morning at 4 in the morning, but if you've got an iPhone or a Samsung, they call that a platform. In other words, the people that developed that platform, that concept of a telephone like this, a mobile phone, then they gave it to the world to use. And when they gave it to the world, then people started putting apps on it. So now you have apps where you can do everything. That's what we're doing in space. We're going to come back to that in a second. You see, what happened here in the US was we got into a race with the Soviet Union. We wanted to see who was the biggest, baddest kid on the block. We wanted to see who had the best economic system. I call this the most expensive selfie ever shot. Right here. The entire American space program that was started by John Kennedy was designed to take one photograph. That picture. All of it. Everything they did, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, was to get that one photograph. So that he could say, we have a better system than the Soviets. That's all it was. And if they had gotten there first, they would have gone, we have a better system than the Americans. That's all it was. And they did a great job. Buzz Aldrin is a good friend of mine. A lot of these people, incredible people. They did a miracle being able to do this in such a short time. But they had no plan for what to do next. This was the goal. This was it. Done. Fini. But they knew why they were doing it. And they were very clear, and they achieved the goal. See if I can get this working. But at the end of the day, because they had no plan, what they left behind was a flag and some footprints in the gray sands of the moon. If we go into space, as we go into space, if we don't understand why we're going, and if it's not for the right reasons, at the end of the day, we'll be going to Mars, and we'll get there, and we won't understand what happened. And in fact, 20 years after we go to Mars, there'll be a television special questioning whether it ever happened and was it done on a movie set. See, the strangest thing about the fact that we went to the moon is we're not there now. I wouldn't have to have this conversation with you if we were on the moon right now. Think about that. If we had been on the moon since 1969, we'd probably be on the moon right now having this meeting, or Mars, or beyond. We have to understand why we're going and do it for the right reasons. We've been trapped in the way of thinking that says this is it, this planet, this one little sphere. This is it. We've caged ourselves, and we have to break out of it. In the US, what we did, and with our international partners, was we went up and built a space station. Why? Because we had the momentum, and we had a few $1 billion that was just being cranked away, and we had a bunch of companies who had come to depend on that money. And we had a bunch of politicians who wanted to bring that money home. We call it, in the US, we call it bringing home the bacon. These are called pork projects. The space station was originally sold as a port that we were going to go out into the universe from. It never happened. It was originally supposed to be built for $8 billion. And it was going to be our stepping stone into the solar system. It was never completed, and they stopped after they spent $100 billion. And now they're talking about throwing it away. We can't ever let that happen. We can't ever let that happen again. We're out there. The generations that are coming up behind us, we can't do that to them. We were lost in space. Once we got out there, we didn't know. We just started going in circles, in fact. That's all we did after Apollo. Just going around in circles, spending the money, bringing home the bacon. Finally, due to a lot of work, and I'll admit this because I'm kind of proud of it, a lot of us worked very long behind the scenes and we were able to end the shuttle program. Now, I know a lot of people who worked on the space shuttle. I know a lot of people who flew on the space shuttle. It's an amazing machine. But we had to end it. We had to stop it so that we could, it's almost like if you have to chop down the big trees so the little trees can grow. It had done its job, and it was time to move on. So it wasn't the end of the program in the United States. It was really the beginning of something exciting, something that's happening now. What you're seeing now is a bunch of people who grew up in the 60s and 70s. That could have been me. That could have been Jeff Bezos. That could have been Elon Musk. That could have been Paul Allen, the founder of Microsoft. That could have been any one of us sitting there watching the TV. I mean, we had that furniture in our house. My father still has some of that. We're watching TV, and you're sitting there watching TV, and it's the 60s and the 70s, and you're watching TV, and this is what you see, Vietnam. And then you flip the channel, and you see somebody's walking on the moon. And then you flip the channel, and it's the Cold War. And then you flip the channel, and they're sending probes to the edge of the solar system. And then you flip the channel, and we're all going to die because it's the end of the war, end of the world is coming. And then you flip the channel again, and somebody is out there exploring the final frontier. And you flip the channel, or you go to the movie theater, and this thing's happening. And you're a little kid, and you're growing up, and you're reading science fiction, and you're seeing these movies, and you're watching these TV shows, and what happens in your head? What choice are you going to make? This is what you want. It's not an accident that Elon Musk and SpaceX's rocket is called the Falcon. The Millennium Falcon. That's why his rocket's called that. And there are people driving around in cars on the moon. I'm a gearhead, I like cars. I was like, wow, they're driving cars on the moon. And Han Solo, I mean, come on. This is the stuff that inspired us. There's a generation now who are out there who went to school and studied hard and founded computer companies and did other things, and they've come back around to their true soul. Now, at the same time, in the 1970s, a book was written by this guy, Gerard K. O'Neill. And Jerry O'Neill, who I was very privileged to work for, him and Freeman Dyson, basically said, you don't have to be in the space agency, and you don't have to be a professor or an academic to dream of going into space. And he wrote this book called The High Frontier. It inspired the entire generation. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, when he gave his speech, when he was graduating from high school, talked about this book and said, I'm going to build colonies in space. I'm going to build an empire. Of course, he was like, what, 17. And then I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to use that money to build cities in space. And he's doing it. Now, if we had handled the internet the way we handled space, all right? If we did the internet the way we had done space, what would happen is several years after we created the internet, you would have computonauts, like astronauts. You'd have computonauts at government facilities driving computers with punch cards, of course, because progress would be very, very, very slow. But we didn't do the internet like that. We gave the internet to the people, like the mobile phone I was talking about. We gave it to the people, and we allowed a billion minds, billions of minds, to apply themselves to doing things on it. And now you could get, well, your mother can send you pictures of kittens doing strange things. But we also get a lot of other good stuff out of it as well. We have to break out of our cage when we think of space. Space is not a government activity, it's a human activity. Now, the key to opening space is getting out there the first 100 miles. This is Robert Heinlein. He wrote a lot of great science fiction books. I recommend you read every one of them. They're pretty amazing. 100 miles up and you're halfway to anywhere. In other words, if you can get out of the gravity well and get out there, then you can go anywhere. Remember, I talked about the mobile phone and the platform and the apps. The platform is the ability to get 100 miles up, and then you could do anything. So these guys are working on it. We have this guy, Elon Musk. Interesting character. He worked with NASA and has been able to fly the Falcon. We're going to come back to his vehicle and his plans for going to Mars in a minute. And he's a total Star Wars fan. By the way, this is one of my, there is no sound on this one. I just love watching this. This is SpaceX landing on a raft. Oh, I love that. Look at that. That is incredible. Why? Because if you can do that over and over and over again, you can bring the cost of going into space down so much that we can afford to go. That's almost like space pornography right there. I just love that. Now this guy's working on stuff too. Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin. Total bookworm. One of his first books that he used to sell was The High Frontier. He's doing it too. In fact, if you follow these guys on Twitter, they're teasing each other all the time. Like, hey man, can you bring your rocket back? I can bring my rocket back. Come on, man, join the club, let's go. But you know what? That's the kind of competition you want. That's the kind of race you want to have. And then there's this guy, Paul Allen. He co-founded a little company called Microsoft. He's putting his money into it. Total nerd. Absolute, just a nerd. He's a geek. The guy they pushed around in school. This happened 2 weeks ago. He just rolled it out. Wingspan, like a soccer pitch. The middle span in between these two vehicles is where he will launch multiple rockets into space. So he can fly up, go in any direction, pick the right orbit, and insert launch vehicles into space. It's happening right now. It's a very exciting time. Let's see if we can pick this up a little bit. Bob Bigelow. He built a chain of hotels, starting with like a little 6-room hotel he and his wife had. He owns several casinos in Las Vegas. He's had 2 modules in space now, I think for almost 10 years. Test modules, they're inflatable. He's going to be building hotels in space. Richard Branson, Mr. Shy. He's going to be flying. Oh, and then there's these guys coming along. They got a station up there, but they don't talk about it much. You don't hear much about it. I'll bet you 5 years, they're going to be on the moon. 5 years. They're going. Why? They watched the same movies. They read the same books. They saw the same space race. They were inspired. They're going. And these guys, I've been there 4 times since I was here last. They are going. The Emir declared that UAE will have a city on Mars within 100 years. Now again, this guy isn't into science fiction. I mean, he reads science fiction, but he's not into like making stuff up. Look at what they did in 20 years in the desert. These are very serious people. This one was just announced. It's called Axiom, former manager of the space station. He's building a private space station. And then there are all these small companies. We're not billionaires. We have to go out and raise the money. And there are more showing up all the time. We have to let 1,000 rockets fly. We have to let a lot of people do a lot of things. And then we can open up the frontier. We will create an industrial infrastructure in space. Now, there are 3 things you have to open up space. 1, you have to be able to get there and back over and over again, repeatedly and cheaply. That's 1. Number 2, you have to be able to use the resources, like the grass I was showing you, the water, so that you can live off of the land and you can do anything you want. And number 3, you have to have governments that either support the idea or stay out of the way. One of the 2. Now, you can change what your governments do. We did it in the US. I threw a summit a few years ago. We brought 100 leaders into a room. I gave them free food, which is, you gotta do that if you want to get people to show up for free for 2 days. We took leaders on the Republican side, the Democratic side. I had people who were the advisors to Romney, who was the guy who ran for president a few years ago. I had the lady who was probably going to be Hillary's head of her space agency. I had them all in one room with Buzz Aldrin, everybody in one room for 2 days. And we worked together. And this was a volunteer organizational meeting. And we got them to agree to this statement. Now, this is critical. Basically, they said they believed that the US human space program should have the goal of settlement and creating a space economy. Nobody had said that before. In fact, they used to call it, in the English terminology, they used to call it the S word, settlement, because it wasn't legit. It sounded science fiction. But look what's happening now. It's happening. And we were able to get some language which has been going through Congress. Even more importantly, this bill was passed in 2015. This is a Space Act of 2015, and it basically says the United States will recognize US citizens' rights when they do things like harvest space resources. I won't get into the details of it, but here's what's interesting. Because I was writing over here today, and I was talking to my host here, and we were talking about the idea of what could you do in the Ukrainian government, let's say. And he told me very legitimately, and this is very true, that there are a lot of things that need to be fixed in the Ukraine right now. There are a lot of legislative things going on that are more important than doing this. And they are, and they're not. And what do I mean by that? Well, see, when this bill was passed, it was passed, and you think what I'm doing is science fiction? The right-wing Republicans, the left-wing Democrats, they voted and they passed this. It's the law in the United States, and President Obama signed it. And they have a lot of other more important things to do. But see, this didn't cost anybody anything. And it's inspiring a new industry. And they could agree on it at a time when they couldn't agree on anything else. And so they were able to pass the law. This is very exciting stuff. Luxembourg's doing the same thing. And yes, as I told you, I've been going over to the UAE. I was a big fan of the movie Lawrence of Arabia, so when they let me dress like that, I tried it on. But I've been going over there, and they've passed a law as well. It's time for a change. It's time for us to start looking at things in a different way. We have to have a new way of talking about space. What makes sense for this one little bubble is something that needs to be changed when we go out into the solar system. There are people who say, well, you're going to go destroy the solar system the way that we've done the Earth. But it doesn't make sense. See, this planet is fragile. This planet is a delicate place with life. But when you go into space, you're carrying life to a place where there is no life. You're doing something new. We were limited a long time ago. We're not limited anymore. How do we save this planet? How do we create a better future? We begin to go out there. We break out of the limits. And we can do that. We can harvest space resources. And we can preserve this planet. Think about a future where you're defined not by how many things you own, how much material goods you have, but the fact that you're part of a civilization that is expanding into the solar system. Think about a child growing up in that universe, growing up in that world. And we're going to do it for everybody. Free enterprise works, by the way. This isn't some sort of grand socialist experiment. You let people do the thing they do best. You let them make the money that they have earned by doing it. I had a friend challenge me. He said, well, why would you do that? I mean, why don't we give a portion of the proceeds of every company to everybody on Earth, and nothing would happen. Enterprise works. The cell phone is one of the best examples. Everybody has mobile phones because we let people invest. The internet is everywhere because we let people invest and we let them grow. The old way of doing things, by the way, was to rip things out of the land. We would take things from the soil. That's been our focus. And the expansion of civilization has always been one where we've been attacking the natural world. Every time we grow a city, every time we grow a civilization, we push back nature. That's been the history of the human race. I don't care where you're from, whether you're a primitive culture or you're an advanced culture. But the new approach, what we're talking about now, is flipping that completely upside down. The technology which will allow us to go into space will be one that we use to plant the seeds of life in places that are dead. It changes who we are, it changes what we're about. We get to become who we want to be. You can go into places where nobody's ever been and try experiments. Where would you go to try the next thing after democracy on the Earth that isn't owned by somebody else? You're saying to yourself, well, maybe I'll go into the ocean. But the ocean is one of the last places that we should be protecting because it helps take care of this planet. Imagine the kinds of civilizations, the kind of cultures. Now, we had this group that came to our continent, the Pilgrims. And I mentioned that to a friend of mine. I said, how would you create the Pilgrims to go into space? And she said, well, you'd create a group of religious fanatics who were intolerant and like to burn people at the stake. I said, okay, no, don't, you're thinking about it too hard. The people that are going to go into space are going to be the new Pilgrims. They're going to include people from different worlds, different cultures, different countries, working together. But yes, they'll be using free enterprise. And by the way, there is nobody who is more aware of the sensitivity of this planet than somebody who is floating in a tin can, looking down at the Earth, breathing their own air over and over again, and drinking their own urine in recycled form. That person is very environmentally aware. What better signal can we send to the generation that's out there right now that cares about the earth than going out into the frontier? And this is why I do this, by the way. My goal is to carry life into the frontier. It's all about life. And it's going to be for everybody. Oh, now let's talk a little bit about some thoughts I have about Ukraine and countries like Ukraine. There is this idea that only certain countries have the right to be leaders in space. And there's two initials for what I think about that, and that's BS. It's ridiculous. You don't have to be a big country anymore. Think about it. We have individual people who are doing their own space programs. Why is there this idea that if you're a certain kind of country, you can't go out and do grand things? Everybody can play. Everybody should be able to play. The reduction in size and cost of technology allows us to think differently, to do new things. There's this old story that somehow the Ukraine was an employee of the Soviet Union. There was no Soviet space program without the Ukraine. There would have been no Soviet space program at the level that it was without what you did here in the Ukraine. You helped make this great. And you've got the legacy here. I've been to Dnipro. I'm going back to Dnipropetrovsk tomorrow to talk at an IT festival. There is a legacy in the Ukraine. You could be involved. You could be a leader moving forward. You got the skills, you got the people, you got the culture. I've been touring around on my last trip. I'm going to do it again on this trip, meeting some of the young people that are working in this field, that are interested in it. It's amazing. You got all of the things that we have in the US, or that they have in Western Europe as well. You've got it here. They just need permission. They need to think that this is something that people believe in. They need to have the chance to do it. And this is what you get to do here in a way, because you get to reinvent here. See, we made the mistake for many, many years in the US of thinking that NASA's job was to do space for the people. And we'll watch on TV while they go do really cool stuff and spend our money. You have the chance here to create a new kind of space program where the government of Ukraine enables the private sector by helping using that legacy, that infrastructure of leading edge technology and research. You've already spent the money to build a lot of that. You've got a generation out there that's not going to be around very much longer who understand this technology. If you put them with the youth, the young people that are coming up now, they can pass on that legacy. And the young people can stand on the shoulders of the giants that you have now. And they can reach for the stars. It can be done. You just have to decide to do it. By the way, Luxembourg, which passed these new laws, has announced that they're creating a space agency. But their space agency isn't going to do space. Their space agency is going to help the citizens of Luxembourg and companies in Luxembourg do space. It's a complete different shift. And by the way, my friends at NASA are doing the same thing. They're starting to shift. They're starting to give us payloads. They're starting to buy things from us. We're going to see more and more of that. These are new ideas. This is a guy up here in Dnipro. This guy's a great little space project going. You could become a world leader. I would love to see, and forgive me because I make myself a bit of a pain on these kind of things sometimes, but I would love to see the Ukraine put out a statement that says we are open for space business. Or to go study what they've done in the UAE, what they've done in the United States, and what they've done in Luxembourg, and look at the actual legislation, look at the actual documentation, and extract those things that make sense for the Ukrainian perspective, put that in a bill, and put it out. It doesn't cost you anything, and yet it sends a gigantic signal to the world that Ukraine is, even as you're dealing with what you're dealing with now, has its eyes on the future. And that's an inspiration that everybody needs. See, it's one thing to be able to say, we're going to save the patient. We're not going to let the patient die. It's another thing to say that we're going to create an Olympic gold medal winner. This is all about starting something new. This is all about what I call an active creation. I'm going to skip through these slides so that we have a little more time here. I talk here about what a settler is, what an explorer is, although I do like this one. Talk about using local materials, sod, dirt. It also has the benefit of being radiation proof, but I don't think they were worried about that. This is not a colony. This is a settlement. Now, this is what we're doing here in the US now, finally. We're starting to get around to it. We're shifting away from the government doing it for us to the government starting to purchase goods and services. In the Old West in the US, they would build a fort way out in the frontier. And then what would happen would be people would start to build cabins and shops around that fort, and they would sell the people in the fort things. And if you cut to 100 years later, this is actually downtown Toronto. 100 years later, you have this little museum that used to be the fort as the center of a thriving economic entity called the city. It's a model that we're talking about using. We're seeing it on the space station. They're buying goods and services. They're enabling the economy to grow up. And we can do that in space. They're starting to buy the rides. I testified in front of Congress in 1995, and I called for all transportation to and from the space station to be commercially derived, with no government rockets. We're finally there. It took us about 17 years to do it, but it's starting to happen. Why is that important? Because if you have more than one contractor, they start to compete, and the prices start to go down. Government can help us do better things. We can work together. And then you can start to give us a place to try our things. This is that Bigelow, this little round thing. It's actually on the space station right now. He's going to take it off once it's proven, and now we have the little space station. My friend Jeff Manber and I were together yesterday in London. He just negotiated a deal with the ULA company, which is Lockheed Martin and Boeing, to recycle used upper stages of their rockets. And he just cut a deal with the space station that they will actually let him have a commercial space station 25 kilometers away in space. So what you're going to see now is what I call the orbital street. You'll have the International Space Station, then you'll have an industrial space station, then you'll have another space station, and another space station. And then the commercial rocket comes up and delivers its goods under the contract to the International Space Station, and then it goes down the street and it delivers. It's like DHL. And then it goes down and it delivers to the next one and the next one. And now you're starting to get a community in space, and things start to happen. And then eventually people start building their own things, and things start to grow. And we start to use the things that are out there. And we start building more facilities and larger facilities. Maybe we can build gas stations like I was talking about before. Or we can build power plants, capturing the power of the sun and beaming it back to the earth. And then we start to build communities. By the way, it's already started. The first commercial lunar missions are going to fly within the next 2 or 3 years. They just got the permits. They're going. We're actually probably going to get ahead of the government in some ways. It's happening. I'm not making this up. It's happening right now. We have this wonderful European concept of the moon village. I love that term because it's not a base. It's a village with different people doing different things. It's exciting stuff. It's starting to happen. I love this picture because it's green. We're going to be doing that. Oh, and of course there are people that have their eyes set on Mars. Mars is the big one. People like Mars. The space community, by the way, is kind of funny because we have the Mars people and we have the moon people and we have the free space people, and everybody thinks that everybody else's idea sucks. Oh, you're a moon guy. I'm a Mars guy. You know, that's ridiculous. We're all going to be working together moving forward. But we can do this with the government and the private sector working together, and we can make these things happen. Of course, there's always that one guy. In our case, his name is Elon Musk. He basically says, screw this, I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to Mars. That's it. He carries payloads to the space station. He's doing stuff like, he's happy to take the money from the government for the contracts. He's going to Mars. Elon's goal is to have 1 million people on Mars in the next 50 years. Even if he gets a fraction of that, 100,000, heck, 10,000 people living in space. And then Jeff Bezos is successful. And maybe Yuri Milner, and some of these other people, they're all successful. That's the beginning of the civilization. It's starting to happen. He's already built the motors for this rocket that'll carry 100 people at a time into space. He's already built the tanks for it. He's just gone to Goldman Sachs, which is one of the biggest financial companies in the world. They're trying to raise $30 billion right now. It's not very public, but it's happening. So, why do we go? This is going to get down to it, and we're going to start heading towards the end here. I know you're itching to get out into the beautiful weather. Here's an interesting thing. If you look at the Earth, the orbit around the Earth, what we call low Earth orbit, LEO, there's a lot of different things that you can do to make money, to provide value. The politics of it, of course, defense. You can study the planet, you can do science, you can do resources, you can do tourism, you can build hotels. If you go to the moon, it's a little bit shorter list. If you go to Mars, you can't really export anything from Mars. It's too far away. There's too much involved. You're not going to be like, I don't know, making Mars, I don't know, whatever, some sort of widget on Mars that you've created, because the guys on the people on the moon and the people in space who are closer will have come up with the same things. It's very hard to understand what you could export from Mars that makes money. And the reason I talk about that is because at that point, you begin to see that it isn't just about business. You see, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and I've been picking on them a lot, but they're kind of out there. They're not doing this to make money. If you think about it, they're making money doing other things. They're doing this because they believe in a dream. I believe in the same dream. Now, all those things I talked about are very, very important. But that's not what this is all about. We have to come out of the airlock and really understand what's going on here. Is the audio working? Is the audio working? No? We have no audio there. You see, we go for different reasons. We go because it's out there. We go because we want to go. We go because it's inspiring. We go because we feel something in here that draws us out. We go because it's what we as living creatures do, like that lichen I showed at the beginning. It's what we do. We go because it's what we must do. And I believe that we go because that's why we exist. Everything I'm showing you here is something that could be built based on the modern technology we have today. The kind of technology that was used to construct this building. Just extended. There's no magic beam me up Scotty here. There's no something that you have to have that comes out of a science fiction fantasy movie. There's no wizards and dragons. It's just the extension of the things we have. And will allow us to go and do anything we want, anywhere we want. We can create new civilizations. We can build colonies in space that are as big as we want them to be. If we were to find out that the gravity of the moon and the gravity of Mars would not allow the human race to reproduce and move forward, we could build habitats in space that rotate and produce the same gravity we have here on the Earth. It's all possible. It's just a matter of scale. You're sitting in a building inside of a city, inside of a country that would have been unthinkable 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. In some cultures, a few hundred years ago. We have the ability to do these things. We have the ability to do incredible things. And think of the things that we get to see. That was the music. That was interesting. It came and it went away. We have the ability to do these things. All of them. We can make them happen. What a future. What an amazing place the future can be. And that's kind of the secret that people aren't understanding yet. And that's what I hope you can begin to understand. I don't know if you've ever walked out on a dark night out in the country and you looked up at the sky. And just looking up at the sky, looking up at the stars. And kind of letting yourself fall upward into that. I know that from space you were able to see it very much more clearly than we do. But think about that feeling you have when you can see the Milky Way, or if you've ever looked through a telescope and seen the rings of Saturn, or seen the craters of the moon and the mountains and realized that that's a real world. What does that do to your mind? I don't have to tell you, you feel it. You feel it. If you didn't feel that, you wouldn't be here today. You'd be at a movie watching somebody blow somebody else up or something like that. And you may still do that, but that feeling that you have, that sense of wonder. There's an entire universe out there. It's calling us. There are things that you can't even imagine that you could imagine that we can see. There are places that you can't even understand where we can go. I believe that we are here to go out there. I believe that the human species has a role. We have several roles. I believe that as life, it is our duty to expand life to places where there are no life. Yes, you hear about billions and billions of stars, and the universe is incredibly big, and this and that and the other. You hear about all these kind of things like this. But what if they don't make it? What if we find out that there isn't worlds out there, that there aren't worlds out there that have life on them? Statistically, we believe it to be true that we think there may be 1 billion worlds with life all through the universe, but we have no evidence of that. And I don't know if you've ever played cards, but I really only bet on the cards I can see in my hand. And that's this planet. And I bet on this planet. And I bet on this civilization. Speaking of civilizations, we certainly haven't been able to find out if there are any civilizations out there like ours. We've been looking. There are entire organizations who have been looking for 30 years for signals from other civilizations that may have gone into space, and we are not finding them. There's a thing called Fermi's paradox that if they're out there, we believe they should be everywhere. But we don't see them anywhere. Why not? Why not? I mean, is it that maybe there's some cataclysm that takes them down? Maybe they never look up and decide to go up. Maybe they have the same president we do in the United States right now, but who knows? What happened? Maybe we're the first. There is that one. Maybe we're just the first to get there. Either way, it's exciting. And if they are out there, I certainly want to be out there to meet them. I want to get out there. I want to say hello on their terms. But I believe that as a civilization, that it is worth it. It's not just worth it. It's who we are to go. Life lives. This civilization, I believe, is worth not just saving, but expanding. And as we expand, we change the reason for being. As I said earlier, imagine you live in a civilization where the rationale for being isn't how much stuff I have, but what I know and what I've experienced and where I can go. Think about your own lives. When you look back on your life, on the moments in your life, what is the most important thing to you? The watch that you had when you were 15? Or the memories of your life at that time? The things that you discovered, or the things that you owned? You see, we as individuals are never more alive than when we're exploring. You are never more alive than when you are at the edge. And whether that edge is stepping into something new, jumping out of an airplane, trying something you've never done, tasting a food you've never done, leaning over to see if she's going to take your kiss or he's going to take your kiss. That moment right there is the moment that you are the most alive. Not when you're playing with your new bling, not when you're looking at this and that and trying to show off and that. It's when you are challenging yourself to go into new realms, to do new things. Isn't that the truth for you? And shouldn't that be the truth for our civilization? Should we shut down as a civilization and say we've done it? There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches and all the deserts on the planet Earth. And there are people that actually have the nerve to say, we've done it. Why are we going out there when we have so many problems down here? Exactly. Exactly. It is when we move into new places that we change the realm in which we come from. It is when you try something new that you transform what you've been. That's how we grow. That's who we are. We are living, thinking, creative, loving, experiencing beings. And it isn't all on this one bubble. It is not all in this one sphere. It's out there. It's out there waiting for us. I challenge you to just not do anything new. I challenge you to go home and sit on your couch for the rest of your life and experience the fake reality of just watching TV. Just do this and see how you feel about yourself as a human being. Our society needs an edge. In fact, without an edge, the center comes apart. We have to create possibility. We have to create the chance to experience the new. We have to carry the seeds of life into the universe. That's why I'm here. I believe we, as human beings, are here to see, touch, taste, feel, experience, love, hate, be a part of, transform, engage with, indulge with, participate in the universe. In fact, at the higher level, I believe the universe doesn't even know of itself unless there are beings like us to be in it. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. You've heard the old line, maybe, if a tree falls in a forest, is there a sound? There isn't a sound if you're not there. Because, see, the translation of a vertical organic structure to a horizontal position is just a movement. And what it does is it sends out a vibration. And the vibration goes through the air. And the air, and the vibration then hits your ear. And it goes in there and it vibrates your tympanic membrane, and that moves some bones. And those bones fire off some neurons, and those electrons go into your brain, and then they go into a place in your brain where they're sorted out, and then it becomes a sound, because you're part of a culture that uses the word sound, or whatever your language is for sound. And then you understand that to be something, and you give it meaning, that I just heard a tree fall. And then you say to yourself, well, I like the fact that trees fall because then they dissolve into the forest. Or I hate the fact that trees fall. Or my father was a lumberjack. You give that vibration, which has no meaning until you hear it and translate it into meaning. I believe that the universe has no meaning without us being in it to experience it. And it ain't all here on this one rock. We are the universe is us. Robert Heinlein, in the book The Stranger in a Strange Land, said, "Thou art God. Thou art God. We are God, the universe is us, I am God, God is the universe," etc., etc. And by the way, that doesn't violate any religious rules. God is everywhere. We are God. We are the universe. Our job is to experience life at its maximum, and that is you as an individual and us as a civilization. And to me, that's amazing. That's an incredible thing. I want to carry ourselves across the bridge into space. In fact, that's our job. Our job is to get these kids out there so that their lives have a new meaning. And what a better time in civilization than right now to do that. I love this planet, but I believe that we are here to go out there. And by the way, this time we get to go together. It's not just one culture rolling across into another culture or discovering a place where there were already people living who didn't know they needed to be discovered and then wiping them out. We get to go together this time. We have the ability. And whoever has the ability can participate. And we're not going to take it from anybody. In fact, we're going to give it to everybody. The goal for me is to carry the light of life to worlds now dark. To carry the seeds of life to places now dead. And the eyes, hands, and minds of humanity to places yet unseen, untouched, and unexplored. That is the mission of myself and my organization. That is why we are here. That is what you are a part of right now. In this period of time, I want you to think about this for just a second. In this 50-year, 100-year period of time, at the very moment in the history of life on this planet, when one species of that life has created the technology that can destroy the entire planet, there arises within that culture the idea that we can take that technology and not just save the planet, but carry its life and civilization to other worlds using the same technology, the same computing systems that were designed to target missiles and bombs, the same rockets that were designed to carry payloads of destruction can carry payloads of life. And you, all of you in this room, live in that period of time. What decision will we make as a society? What decision will we make that determines whether there are people like us who are different, 100, 500, 1,000 years from now, who can look back at this moment? This moment when you were alive and say they made the right choice. Thank you.